So we're joined by a fantastic panel today with perspectives from local, national and regional levels. We have Mrs. Janine Waltz, Deputy Head of Mission, Head of Cooperation from the Embassy of Switzerland to Ghana, Togo and Benin. We have Mame Camara Montero, Director of Land Planning from the UMOA Commission. Mr. Alex Johnson, Head of Transport Planning from GAPTE, which is the Greater Accra Passenger Transport Executive. And we also have Ernst Engemang, Associate Professor in Transport Geography, University of Ghana, as well as Percy Anad Bukhari, who is the President of the Ghana Institute of Planners. And of course, my colleagues from the Sahel and West Africa Club, our Director, Mrs. Nana Touré, Mrs. Marie Cremolière, Head of the Security, Climate and Territories Division, as well as my colleague Jorge Patino, Geographical Scientist. So today, our conversation will have the following format. We'll have some opening remarks, followed by 2 presentations. And after that, we'll open up some questions for our panelists. And we'll also be taking some questions from the chat. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Mrs. Nana Touré to open the discussion and set the scene. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, partners, and colleagues. On behalf of the OECD Sahel and West Africa Club, it is a great honor to welcome you to today's seminar co-hosted with the Greater Accra Passenger Transport Executive. This event marks the culmination of more than 2 years of close collaboration, supported by our members and an additional contribution of the Swiss Development Cooperation. It is focused on reshaping urban transport systems in Ghana. A shared vision has driven our work in Ghana and Kumasi. That vision is to provide solid evidence that promotes transport systems that are more accessible, inclusive, and sustainable. Our goal was to address the pressing challenges of congestion, air pollution, and limited mobility options faced by millions of people every day. To do this, we combined innovative data with an accessibility model adapted to the local context. We also used participatory methods to ensure local voices were heard. In a context of growing urbanization, both Accra and Kumasi confront formidable challenges, including rising pollution, congestion, emissions, and traffic accidents. Even though most residents rely on walking and particular transport, notably trotros, it remains difficult to reach essential services throughout the city via these modes of transport. Yet, residential developments on the periphery frequently lack infrastructure and essential services. Their road layout often makes it difficult to travel without a car, while limited street connectivity as well, and rising congestion reduce walkability and access. As a result, many residents, especially women, balancing work and caregiving, face significant barriers. However, the reallocation of road space to people and sustainable transport modes presents a significant opportunity for these cities to address the accessibility gaps in today's transport system. Our analysis shows how different scenarios can fill accessibility gaps. This can also help reduce congestion and limit rising pollution and emissions. Today, we gather to reflect on the key outcomes of this initiative. The data we produced provides a foundation to guide investment priorities and inform regional and national land planning policies. It also supports stronger policy public-private partnership and the integration of gender-responsive perspectives into mobility planning. This work fits directly into Accra's Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan as well, helping ensure that lessons from our collaboration are embedded in the city's future. Our discussions will feature voices from local authorities and national actors such as the Ghana Institute of Urban Planners and the University of Ghana, therefore the academia, who contributed to mapping, context analysis, and ground surveys. Regional institutions, including the West African Economic and Monetary Union, will also share their perspectives. Together, we will explore how to scale these solutions beyond Accra and Kumasi, extending their benefits across West Africa. At the core of our work, it is a simple, powerful idea. Mobility is not just about moving from point A to point B. It's about access to jobs, access to education, access to healthcare, and access to opportunities. And it is also about equity and sustainability. As Accra's population grows and its urban footprint expands, the choices made today will determine the city's livability for generations to come. Building resilient systems able to adapt to climate risks is a long-term challenge, but it also presents opportunities to create healthier, more inclusive, and more prosperous cities. I thank you for being part of this important conversation today, and I look forward to a fruitful seminar filled with insights, shared experiences, and a collective commitment to building better transport systems for all. Thank you very much, and thanks for being here again.
Thank you, Nana, for those opening words and remarks and for framing the discussion for us today. I'd like to now invite Mrs. Janine Waltz to provide some opening remarks from the Swiss Development Cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. It is my honor to participate on behalf of the Swiss Embassy in Accra in this virtual seminar on urban mobility. And we especially thank the Sahel and West Africa Club under the auspices of the OECD for the organization of this seminar among policymakers, researchers, and practitioners. The rapid urbanization of the African continent brings immense opportunities, but it also puts increasing pressure on transport infrastructure. In Accra and Kumasi, rising pollution, congestion, and traffic jams are affecting people's quality of life and their access to market, health facilities, and schools. Many residents have no choice but to walk across the city or rely on informal minibuses, trot-trots in the absence of more sustainable and inclusive solutions. So Switzerland has been working alongside the Sahel and West Africa Club for many years to promote sustainable and inclusive urban development. We are convinced that efficient and safe and environmentally friendly transport systems are a powerful lever for strengthening social cohesion, stimulating economic growth, and combating climate change. The Sahel and West Africa Club plays a key role in providing rigorous data and facilitating the strategic dialogue needed to anticipate regional transformation. Its contribution provides member states and development actors with contextualized analyses to formulate coherent urban and mobility policies adapted to local realities. The Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, which has funded the work that is presented today, remains strongly committed to the Sahel and West Africa Club. At this occasion, we would also like to warmly thank all partners: Greater Accra Public Transport Authority, the University of Ghana, the University of Manchester, and the OECD International Transport Forum for their area expertise, commitment, and multidimensional dialogue, which made this work possible. Going forward, Switzerland hopes to strengthen its partnership with Ghana in the implementation of concrete solutions, support for data collection, training for planning authorities, financial support for active mobility pilot projects, and promotion of public-private co-financing mechanism. These efforts should also complement the ongoing Swiss-funded Ghana Urban Mobility and Accessibility Project, GOMAP, which achieved many positive results, including enhanced capacities built in the transport departments of the local assemblies in the Greater Accra metropolitan area, GAMA. We firmly believe that an integrated approach combining physical infrastructure, institutional innovation, and citizen participation is the only way to build resilient and inclusive cities. So, dear listeners and friends, I invite you to take full advantage of this virtual seminar to share your experience, compare your expertise, and work together to build an operational action plan. May each contribution be an opportunity to enrich our collective vision and define common priorities for sustainable, accessible, and inclusive mobility for all in Ghana and beyond. Thank you very much, Medase.
Thank you very much, Janine, for those words. And also thank you to Swiss Development Corporation for its strong commitment to this agenda. I'd like to now turn to my colleague Jorge to provide the first presentation for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm starting my presentation. I will share that in a second. Okay, now I'm there. Okay, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. Today, I will be presenting alongside my counterpart in Accra, Alex Johnson, who is the head of planning from the Greater Accra Public Transport Executive, the metropolitan agency that coordinates public transport across the districts in Greater Accra. And this project, we have seen that the transport systems of Accra and Kumasi today are emblematic of the broader challenges that many other African cities face. That means persistent congestion, escalating air pollution, and also rising traffic accidents, as well as increasing emissions. These difficulties are endemic to the urban life, but also inflict palpable consequences on productivity, on public health, and on the overall quality of life in the cities. But Accra is now making a strategic pivot, as you will hear from Alex later, to redirect these transport systems toward a system characterized by accessibility, sustainability, and inclusivity in line with the Sustainable Development Goal 11. So first, I want to stress that this is an international collaboration among experts based in Accra and Kumasi, as well as in Manchester in the UK and here in Paris in France. We work closely with the expert base at the University of Ghana, as well as other Ghanaian experts and researchers based at the University of Manchester, then also with experts from the International Transport Forum here in Paris, and with our counterparts in the Greater Accra Passenger Transport Executive, under the coordination of my colleague, Brilliant Anderson here from the OECD's Sahel and West Africa Club. So in this work, we basically combine three different approaches. First, we use satellite imagery and the Africa Police database to understand how the city has grown and how it may expand in the future. The second one is that we adapted the International Transport Forum's accessibility model to the local context to see how well people can reach the essential services around the city. And third, we conducted a field survey to capture the daily travel patterns and their differences across income groups and genders. So now let's see some of the main results of this approach in the case of Accra. The urban agglomeration of Accra has expanded rapidly over the last 30 years, as well as other many urban agglomerations across the continent. That is a general trend. And the analysis of the satellite imagery revealed that over the past 35 years, Greater Accra has undergone remarkable expansion from an estimated 400%. And most of this expansion has occurred in the more peripheral areas of the city rather than in the historical coastal districts. And this growth is mostly residential, meaning that services stay concentrated in the core while the periphery remains underserved. Then we also use the spatial information from the Africa Police database that projects up to 231% more increase in the extension of the urban agglomeration in 2050. And this, you can see, is the darker area in this map. And this means that it's going to reach about 4,500 square kilometers in 2050 and will reach maybe around 10 million people. So this is a huge increase, and we have to prepare for this growth. And I am taking a parenthesis here to highlight that the Africa Police database is one of the SWAC's flagship products. It is a spatial database that maps and tracks urban agglomerations across the continent and provides information on population and also on the urban extents in 2015, 2020, and also projections every 5 years up to 2050. And it is a great tool to support policymaking and sustainable development in Africa. So now we can see two main insights from the survey. The first one is that with an increase in income, there is a clear preference to use private vehicles, cars, motors, and ride-hailing services. And this could be problematic because this trend goes in the direction of car dependency, more congestion, and more energy use for transport. But the second one is that actually most people use trottoirs and walk for daily travel. And trottoirs are these small privately owned minibuses like the yellow one you see in the picture to the left. Then the survey also reveals that while trottoirs are the most affordable option, using them can be rather difficult sometimes. Trottoir drivers often refuse entry to children under 12 years old to avoid spending too much time waiting for them to enter or exit the trottoirs. And this disproportionately affects women bringing children to and from school. Moreover, our results indicate that trottoir usage drops significantly among low-income groups when traveling with children. And also, market traders encounter extra challenges when using trottoirs. We have seen that 70% of the survey respondents transporting heavy loads reported being charged extra money, and 50% of market traders were denied entry because their goods and packages. And also, routes on unpaved roads, which are almost a third of the road end in Accra, make trips long and a little bit uncomfortable. Now, results from the accessibility model allow us to identify what we call the accessibility deserts. These areas of the city where all essential services are located very far away. And one important insight from this analysis is that 61% of the residents cannot reach a market within 30 minutes on foot. And since markets are a key source for the women's employment, this gap has a stronger impact on women than in men. Now let's talk about opportunities. We use the model to ask what if questions. What if we made some changes? What would be the improvements? So going one step further, we tested different scenarios using the model, and 3 main policy insights arose. First one, if people could bike instead of walking, access to essential services could increase by up to 1/3. That's a huge increase. The second one is that if more space is dedicated to public transport and the service is extended to the periphery, it could move more people in less space, easing congestion and improving mobility and accessibility for everyone at the same time. And this is important because it's not only that it will improve accessibility and mobility for public transport users, but it's for every other road user. Everyone gets its gains. And the third policy insight is that accessibility also improves when we bring services closer to the people. This strategy that means creating proximity within the urban layout could be create proximity and maximize impact at the same time when we could target the building of new schools, healthcare services, or markets along the public transport routes, and also in the areas that are the most densely populated areas. And on a side note, data visualizations like these ones, like these maps, that maps population density at the same time as the distance to the services, help to identify the potential areas for high impact interventions. So to finalize, these are the main takeaways stemming for this work. I will group them into three. The first one is that reallocating road space to sustainable modes and make targeted data-driven incremental investments is needed. So we need a plan to know where to go, but the execution is a step-by-step process and can be targeted to implement these interventions first in the areas that we have the most impact. The second one is that this work needs improved metropolitan governance with a strong coordination entity like GAPTE, and include also local communities through participatory and gender-responsive planning. And the third one is that the coordinating land use and transport planning will create proximity. And this strategy that is also called transport-oriented development helps to create proximity between the people and the services and supports sustainable mobility in the long term. And we have to remind that all of this has to be made context specific with the people of the city. So this is my last slide. Thank you very much for listening to me. And to learn more about the work, please follow the link at the top in this slide to SWAC's webpage, and use the 3 QR codes on the slide to read our working papers on these topics. Thank you very much, and thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jorge, for the very rich presentation. So I think those 3 takeaway messages provide a nice framework for our conversation today. So building on that, I'd now like to give the floor to Mr. Alex Johnson from GAPTE about how this data is shaping planning and investment. So over to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I would like to stand on the protocol of the earlier speakers to share my slide, so we can dive straight in. Yes.
Perhaps, Alex, you might be able to speak a little bit louder for us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I would like this presentation to be very conversational, especially from the experience we have had collaborating with our colleagues across the regions. Some of the issues we are presenting, I'm making sure that it's not repetitive, and also putting the regional issues into context to make sure that the real on-the-ground issues will be approached. By the time we finish these discussions, would have, let me say, a concerted agreement in the way to collaborate further in improving services. I bring this map up as a basis for some insights that we have had in the distribution of services. These services are educational institutions, early childhood educational institutions, or facilities that will be required by the population across the metropolis. So the red dots you see are what people need within the first medium term per the population. So the expansion goes to about 2030, and that's the medium term from now. And you can see us comparing the red dots to the blue dots, that early childhood facilities are woefully inadequate. And when we talk about congestion in Accra, you can imagine people who want to send their children to school that must use vehicles, or let me say motorized transport as a means. But these are expected to be let me say, community-based facility. And once we are taking care of some of these issues, we can imagine the reductions that we can expect, especially for all the traffic or motorized traffic that have the purpose of sending children to school. Okay. We have put all the data in context of other support systems that GAPTE has been receiving from SECO. We just completed a first, let me say, phase of a Ghana Urban Mobility Accessibility Project that looked extensively at the nature of the traffic distribution across the metropolis. And clearly, you can see the concentration of traffic moving into town, just as the project's, let me say, findings have revealed. And these are issues that are giving us the insights that we need to establish a data sharing management system so that other collaborators, people who are interested in urban development issues, can access this data and to be able to make intelligent decisions based on the distribution of the services. The opportunity this data provides us is that it is high resolution, 500-meter, let me say, square measurements. So you have a facility reference and brings all of these points of interest or whatever you target to look at as a point of interest in the provision of services to a very local accessibility level of thinking about how these services could be accessed. So Jorge mentioned the tool, that's the International Transport Forum tool that was used. This tool really brings us to a point of reconceptualizing how we are able to engage open source software and to be able to effectively use that to also communicate need levels in the types of services across different sectors. So you are looking at primary school or educational services, healthcare services, and also market infrastructure. And you are putting that data or establishing the service level data as a basis to look at how the transport network is performing in the context of people's access to those services. And in fact, I should say that for once, we have had a very good opportunity to look at the approach of mobilizing community resources to respond to services in the long-term planning perspective. What this is doing for us is that it's actually painting the real picture of how inadequate some of the services are, and then the perceptions that the informal sector does not have a real problem. There is a perception that people work a lot, and so they should have access to facilities around them. But if you measure them in terms of the data analysis, Jorge talked about the service islands or desert areas where people have to walk 30 minutes to be able to reach a market facility, for instance. And that truly is a challenge. We have tried to look at all the issues also again in the perspective of our sustainable urban mobility planning. SECO is going to be supporting us in a second phase of BOOMUP to be able to develop a sustainable urban mobility plan. We have started a data framework arrangement outlining objectives for how the composition, or let me say the development of these mobility plans are going to happen. And basically, we have noticed that the benchmark data we have from the OECD Sahel study on Accra and Kumasi is providing us a benchmark, so a measurement basis now to be able to determine need requirements. also to give us a perspective of how to moderate our discussions with all stakeholders, making sure that we are able to develop a vision to really target the kinds of services that we want. This impression concerns, or artist impression concerns an area in Accra, the Weja area, which doesn't look anywhere close to this, but you can see a lot of population around there. Our thinking is moving into need-based assessments, especially for housing, and also mobility from housing areas to workplaces. So in the long term, the narrative for integrated planning between transport and services, especially housing, has become very strong for us. Going forward, so that is the same area, looking at the issue at the level of social inclusion. These are children going to school, and they have to, let me say, rely on social culture of motorists, very sensitive to children crossing roads and making sure that they cross. But I don't think that this is the best scenario we want to consistently see. So the issue of inclusion or social inclusion, gender inclusion for infrastructure development cannot be more real than we are looking at now. And then we have looked at the data that we have. You know, when you looked at the, let me say, the primary data, there are a lot of resources also pointing to congestion zones within the metropolis. And this has given us a candid, let me say, space-specific direction. Initially, you will be planning, so you have the issues in terms of conception. You find it difficult to relate them on how they should reflect on the ground. But with the OECD supported data, we are able to now identify hubs or zones within the metropolis to make sure that we can align government initiatives very positively to addressing and prioritizing the issues, making sure that we can have, let me say, a continuum of investment plans to make sure that the more serious issues can be targeted first, or make the, let me say, investment case propositions for those issues. We have, or let me say, we have discussed issues of how to transition from trotros to mass transit, which we have all agreed that is the best way to move forward. What we try to do with this slide is simply to take the trotro off the background and bring a very beautiful mass transit option into the picture. And I can tell you that all these people trying to board the trotro, they don't need to change their clothes to into a new dress to get into a new transport. So it means that the public sector has a very big work to do. And now the question is, how are we able to mobilize stakeholder involvement and put the communication of the data, which is providing the business intelligence, to allow investors to take very good decisions, low risk decisions in their investment planning. The same thing is happening here. You can clearly identify that most of our transport operations happen in open space terminals, but we can have multi-purpose buildings or infrastructure and spaces which are also taking care of transport needs. And this will be solving multiple stakeholder interests. So people who need to access services can directly get into the service. So I think the long and short of the whole story is that if you have data, it gives you the opportunity to be able to create multiple scenarios And this is what this data has done for us. I want to thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to listen very carefully to the discussions and hope that we can move all of our region forward, the cities in the West Africa area. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. That's been a really, really insightful presentation. I think what's really important in a lot of what you said is moving from data to policy decision making, and you talked about data informing business cases and investment plans, which of course is extremely important. And you also touched on the issue of inclusion across genders, but also other population groups such as children. So I think now we'd like to transition to some of the questions for our panelists. And perhaps just a reminder as well to our listeners to do keep some questions coming in the chat. So I will now turn to Mrs. Mame Camera Montero from the UMOA Commission. Mame, Alex just highlighted how data is reshaping planning at the city level. But my first question to you is, from your regional perspective, how you think experiences from Accra and from Kumasi can inform UMOA's regional frameworks. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Jennifer. Merci aux
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you to the speakers. And thank you for sharing this experience in Accra and Kumasi. Well, the diagnosis from those cities is quite similar in the whole of the UEMA or YEMU area in all of these major cities. Well, just to give you one example, according to a World Bank survey, in Abidjan today, 18.5% of jobs are accessible in less than 1 hour. So more than 80% of jobs cannot be reached under 1 hour of commute every day. So, and this is really quite similar in many cities of the UEMA area. Also, there's urban sprawl, which only adds to the commute. So this is, again, a common diagnosis across the area. So we obviously find this project very interesting to ensure that where people live is where they can work through the transformation of our urban transportation and urban planning. We indeed have produced the Regional Urban Planning UEMOA project, which gives pointers, which gives guidelines in this regard. States are sovereign, obviously, when it comes to urban transportation and urban planning. We at the UEMOA, we give guidance in this regard in terms of urban planning, whilst taking into account community orientations. And this initiative that we've just heard could usefully give insight within our project and within our guidance, and could fuel also a further survey, a further project at the regional level to see how other states could draw inspiration from that initiative with a view to, as we see it, solve a number of problems. Many planning documents, regional planning documents that we promote, promote that form of gradual planning process and change process. We have urban transportation plans, obviously, but it's one thing to have the plans, it's another thing to implement them.
Merci, Mame. Thank you, Mame, for those inputs. I'd like to maybe just follow up with the second question to perhaps have your view on what role spatial data can play in better informing, whether it's transport policies, urbanization policies, to inform policy making for sustainability and resilience. And that could be, at national or regional levels. Thank you.
D'accord. Ces données spatiales sont
spatial data is obviously essential because, as I said earlier on, states have to, draft their planning documents and strategies. And to do that, they need spatial data. In this regard, we believe that so-called urban observatories, especially focused on transportation, could be well indicated. And at the regional level within the UEMOA, we have what we call the Regional Observatory of Community Territory Monitoring. We work with a number of focal points, and we've come to the conclusion that these focal points could contribute these spatial data, and in order to allow for proper monitoring of the situation in each country. And this data could fuel a number of local observatories. And within our regional observatory, we would very much want to use the special data through the what we call the community platform.
Thank you, Mame. Thanks for sort of bringing that together, because it's true that when you think about strong regional frameworks, they need good local data to be meaningful. And then conversely, good data can actually have more impact when tied to regional strategies. So thank you for bringing those two strands together and talking about data and frameworks. And I think it's a powerful combination for scaling up sustainable mobility. So thank you for your inputs on that. I'd like to now turn to Ernst from the University of Ghana. So Ernst, we've seen two interesting presentations, and we've seen that urban expansion is outpacing the provision of essential services like schools, markets, healthcare, especially in peripheral areas. So I'm wondering if you could draw on your work as a professor on transport geography and tell us maybe your view on how cities can better foster proximity between these essential services and where people live. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer, and good afternoon to everyone. I think the two earlier presenters, Jorge and Alex, have done such a yeoman's job at painting a picture to the current land use mismatch in relation to mobility needs of everyday commuters in Accra. Certainly, as they've already said, there are more people living at very distant locations from centers of opportunity. It is quite common to see in Accra and Kumasi that a lot of the important trip generating opportunities are located at the city center, while people are living at distant locations. And so over the years, studies that have been done, including the Ghana Statistical Services Transport Indicator Database surveys, as well as other studies that I have directly undertaken, and also literature I've read, indicate that indeed people are living at distant locations. And so there's a need to really plan and see how we can integrate them, to make it easy to promote access. I mean, I listened to the inaugural speech from Nana, who says that mobility is not just about moving from point A to point B, but it's about improving accessibility. So how do we do that? Given the current land use structure, where people are living over longer distances, it promotes car dependency. And so to overcome that, there's a need to ensure that, two main approaches, I'm thinking through two main approaches. The first one is on spatial planning, urban planning strategies. We need to rethink the way the city has been planned in terms of thinking through a compact city development, or what has been known as a transit-oriented development. Elsewhere, there is conversation around the 15-minute city concept, whereby we plan such that people live in close proximity to their centers of opportunities. And so within Accra specifically, or Kumasi, I'm thinking that there are opportunities for us to improve on it. Currently, the city authority through the AMA has this Millennium Cities initiative, especially for the Gamashi, the city core, to redevelop perhaps into high-rise apartments around the Labadi area, Tudu area, Kaneshi area, to promote, for instance, a number of former sector employees. I know, for instance, Alex stays within that enclave, and it's a lot easier for him when he was working at the AMA offices to walk or to not go necessarily with a car because it's so close. So can we identify vacant locations or underutilized properties and redevelop them vertically so you can get a lot more people to be living in close proximity to these centers of opportunities? It allows for them to walk to their offices, to their schools, to hospitals, to entertainment centers, with less stress. I also think that there's a need for us to demonopolize the city center. As Alex indicated, with the consultancy report that he showed, a lot of the traffic direction is towards the CBD, especially during the peak hour periods. But there's the need to fully implement the Greater Accra Metropolitan Area Strategic Plan. The idea is to see if you can have multi-nuclear centers. So, for instance, you can take, let's say, some other markets acting as magnets to draw the flows from the center, so from the central, east, and western part of Accra. A lot of the trips that are made from these, dormitory communities that end in the CBD. But can we demonopolize? Can we improve on other market outlets, retail outlets like the Kaneshi market, like the Madina market, so that it can sieve some of the traffic flows that come to the CBD? Is very important. Again, there's a need to also relook the BRT concepts. I mean, we didn't quite succeed. Initially around 2016 November, we tried to introduce the BRT. We were not so successful, but I think it is a way to go. And also to promote non-motorized transport modes. How do we do that? Studies have shown that a lot of people walk, right? There are captive walkers, a lot of them in the city. Biking is not so pronounced. A lot of people do not really cycle in the city. But to promote active transport, I think that there's a need to prevent the encroachment of the pedestrian walkways. Many a times you see commercial activities, people are hawking or they are trading on the pedestrian walkways, and that is something we need to have a conversation around. Again, in terms of safety at night for females who want to walk, in the evenings, we need to provide adequate lighting and security. The surface quality of the existing walkways also needs to be improved. So basically, there are a number of issues that need to be put in place, and these are just the planning aspect. One other key issue that I'm reflecting on is on the land use arrangement, the land tenure systems. So the lands are usually owned by the local chiefs and clan heads. And by and large, we sit like we are doing now at conferences, at various fora, and we share ideas on how to improve the situation without recourse to the owners of the land. We've had, for instance, I participated in the year 2000, the Ghana Urban Forum. We met at the Movenpick Ambassador Hotel. Then in 2024, we had this Urban Mobility Forum, being promoted by the Ministry of Local Government. And we spoke all the nice English. We came up with all the strategies. But at the end of the day, the government of Ghana doesn't own most of the lands. So I think that there's a need to bring along the local authorities. I mean the local chiefs and the power brokers, the opinion leaders, to, as it were, co-design, co-develop how to make the city a lot more accessible. Jennifer.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Ernst. There's quite a lot in what you said. You did mention the BRT, and I wanted to come back to this question around, how can we integrate informal transport systems like the Trotros into formal planning frameworks so that they can support accessibility more effectively? Perhaps you could react to that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And so a little background into where we are, how we've arrived at this at this point is very important as we seek to integrate the informal operators into the formal sector. So years ago, just after independence, it was just a state providing formal bus services. Sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, the state weaned itself and then allowed the private people. So from 1980s up until now, close to about 4 decades, you've had private individuals who have expressed autonomy about their own business model. So they procure their fleets, they buy their buses, they form unions, very powerful unions, and they've been serving people, demand and supply, they are meeting that. But over the years, we do know that there are a number of challenges that, confront the service provision. As we've rightly said, there are more people living in the cities now, but supply hasn't been able to match up with the rising demand. And so government over the years have tried to formalize the activities. A case in point is the National Transport Policy that aims to move people en masse. And so we have experimented with a number of mass transit options. The Metro Mass Transit System came in. Then the Ayalolo, quality bus service also came in. The idea was to encourage the existing operators, the public transport operators, which, by the way, they are profit-driven. These are individuals who have invested into public transport. And the idea was to get them to form limited liability companies for them to join. Well, we all do know how well we fared. We didn't quite succeed. And there are a number of interesting reasons that led to the collapse. And I think once we reflect on the reasons, it'll be a lot easier for us to find the solutions. One of my colleague researchers, Dr. Theodore Asimen, did some work on that. He did interview some of the drivers, and one key thing is that they want to, still stick to their autonomy. So they decide when they set off in the day to go and work. They decide on when they go for break. They decide on a number of things. But what really came to the fore is that when he tried to model what would make them, allow themselves to be integrated into the existing formal system, and what he found was that a lot more of the conversation should be more about financial incentives. So for instance, he asked them if, for instance, you were to earn an extra, let's say 40 cedis at the end of the month, an extra income, if you were to formalize, if you were to move from your everyday, modus operandi, and you were to allow yourself to be formalized into formal bus operation, and you were supposed to receive an extra 40 cedis, which is roughly about €3. Would that influence your decision? Indeed, that data suggests that many people are willing to switch to, the formalization effort by the state. But without the financial incentives, many of them are not willing to. Again, we need to also see the extent to which the state has engaged them over the period. It's very important, because if you're asking somebody to join, then the person must also take a look at how you've treated them in the past. So over the years, the experience has been that government, through the Ministry of Transport, will engage them. So they engage them usually at the point of setting price fares, for the activities, but it allows for them to do everything on their own. Now, over the years, there's been a lot of mistrust, between the state and then the private entities as to what exactly the state wants in trying to formalize them. So we need to build the trust again. That needs to be rebuilt. Again, can we also talk about the state trying to support them in terms of providing an enabling environment, maybe incentivizing the banks? Years ago, I saw a number of new, buses that have been procured with some banks, like Stanbic Bank, assisting the GPRT, which is the largest transport union, to procure new buses. Maybe that's the way to go. But finally, my key point is that we should also, as a country, learn to depoliticize our policies. So, for instance, when we began the BRT, it was a very lengthy conversation. Ghana was the first within the sub-Saharan African country to have actually rolled out the BRT in 2008. But then there was a lot of back and forth conversation. In 2010, South Africa launched its own BRT. I think one of the key challenges has been the lack of continuity. So one government would begin something, there seems to be progress, another government comes into office and then there's a reversal of the progress. And that's something that we cannot have this conversation without taking a critical look at. The lack of continuity, the politicization of public policies, and how we take one step forward and 2 steps backward. All of these are issues that we really need to have conversation around if we were to really integrate the informal transport operators into the formal systems. Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Ernest. That's just really insightful inputs there. You've covered so much, putting a a focus on the transit-oriented development. You've talked about, that very visual image of, creating multi-nuclear centres acting as magnets to draw the flows from the central business districts. You've talked about the complexities of integrating the BRT and the TOTRO systems. You've also made a very important point about the land tenure systems and also drawing on local chiefs and local authorities and bringing them into the conversation and co-creating the land planning around that. You've also spoken also very importantly about the implementation of those policies and their continuity, and also having an impact to what extent things can be integrated together. So thank you so much for all of those important points. I'd like to now turn to our next panelist, Percy. Welcome, Percy, and I'd like to sort of we've seen from the presentations the sheer scale of urban growth and the critical need for long-term planning. So my question to you is, how can infrastructure investments keep pace with this expansion while also addressing critical issues like climate change? Over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. So I want to also stand on existing protocols that has been established by my earlier presenters, that of Alex Johnson and then Professor Ernest Ajimai. So mine, I'm looking at how infrastructure can really be used as a means of curbing this rapid growth of population by way of urbanization. What I would like to say is that clearly infrastructure, as my predecessors, those who have made the earlier comments or presentations have clearly alluded to, plays a key role. And from Alexis and then Prof's presentation, it's clear that here in Accra, the most used mode of transport is road transport. So certainly, if we want to expand infrastructure, we need to expand road infrastructure. Currently, as we speak, almost all the 4 major corridors of Accra, if I say corridors in Accra, those moving from the CBD to the various outlets in Accra, the 4 major corridors are under construction. The one which is gaining momentum now is the N6, which is moving. That's quite the one in the middle, moving from Accra CBD towards Circle, moving out to Kumasi and the other areas is what is really under construction. And we are fully aware that that road has come under key concerns, but now today we just heard it's about 75% complete and it's under construction. We also know that the other side of the N1 towards the central to the western region is also under construction through Kaswa, that's the western side, and the eastern side towards from Tema, Accra Tema, towards the road moving the international road going towards Togo, and then our neighbors in Nigeria. That road is also it's been awarded on contract, but they're having some few issues. So work has stalled a little bit. And then obviously those that are also moving on the Dodowa stretch through the northeastern side of Accra is also under construction. Having said this, the infrastructure expansion certainly would improve upon the transportation system, especially all these roads per the designs I've seen. It's built on the highway system where you have 3 lanes in the middle, and then you may also have some service lanes on the side. So it will certainly improve upon the transport system within the built-up area. But then what we are seeing is that once these roads or these infrastructures are developed, the road infrastructure are developed, it must be linked to the development of some other inner routes, because these are major arterials that are moving on major corridors, but they need feeders. The feeders here would be the development of the outer ring infrastructure and also give alternative routes for the major, highways to link up to the various neighborhoods in Accra. And once that is done, it will create the system whereby we don't have huge traffic volumes in the major arterials that causes a lot of delays in the movement within the built-up Accra area. So the travel time, say the average travel time, which must be 30 minutes, 35 minutes, moving on maybe a 10, 15 kilometer stretch, people do it within 2 hours in and 2 hours out. So Accra, for those who stay outside the inner perimeter of the mainland Accra, really, use more than 2 to 3 hours daily. In some cases, 4 to 5 hours, just moving to work and then coming back. So really hitting on these key highways construction is good, but the advocacy that we keep on making is to also develop the other arterials to make them quite efficient. For the issue of our transport policy is clear, and as Prof just mentioned, our transport policy is linked to doing mass transportation. But what we also realize is that there's some policy incoherence there. Whilst the main policy is to do mass transportation, we also find government using state money to also go in to buy really low capacity vehicles, and some even do this bus hailing, ride hailing vehicles, buying just a three or four seater vehicles that some private operators use as Uber or Yango or this other online shared or private taxis that we find in the system. And that is also not good enough, because you realize that once the policy is to go mass transport, apart from the Ayalolo that Prof mentioned, and also the Metro Mass Transit and city bus services, is not that rampant. What we see, over 70 to 80% of the traffic that we normally find within the road transport mix in the urban areas, all have to do with this minivans and all that. And this is not still curing the problem. So whilst we develop the road infrastructure and put in the required finishes to actually support movement and all that, the service itself is not heavy on mass transport. And that is what is accounting for the huge traffic jams that we find in our built-up Accra. Now, linking it with some climate adaptation and then mitigation issues, we realize that certainly, whilst these traffic jams are quite high and people spend more than 2 to 3 hours, and in some cases 4 to 5 hours in traffic, and most of these vehicles use normal, we are now experimenting with EV vehicles and some few electronic buses that have come in that is on pilot basis. Most of these vehicles, we use fossil fuel, and their huge traffic volumes also end up creating huge carbon intake in the environment in which we find ourselves. The latest, I participated in the latest a conference where an NGO called Clean Energy, they were presenting their parents' report on the state of our environment in terms of carbonization or decarbonization of the air. And some, air monitors, the feedback we are getting is not very good enough. It's not very good enough. And we are also aware that as the city also expands, the rate at which the natural vegetation is being cut, the protection of the forest reserves within the built-up area, and the green belts that have also been created along our northern and then eastern corridors are all going because of urbanization. So, in addition to the huge traffic jams that we find in our built-up area, that is creating or contributing immensely to the carbonization of the air, causing pollution and all that. We are also getting having most of our green belts and open spaces where we have most of our trees also being cut because of urbanization, rapid urbanization. Our
Thank
advocacy
you.
our core advocacy here is to ensure that the various localities prepare local plans and areas where they've designated for green belts, they are also able to protect it for us so that we don't end up having our areas highly carbonized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Percy. Thank you for those insights. And I wondered if I could maybe circle back to one of the other issues within this conversation around inclusivity and gender responsiveness. I'm just wondering from, you're at the Ghana's, the National Planning Institute, what kinds of criteria guide planning investments to ensure that they are inclusive across population groups and genders? Thank you.
Okay, so it has come up in most of our discussions. The key criteria that we use, because we've also signed up to the most of international treaties, we ensure that most of our public terminals, most of our buses, especially those that are provided by government and all that, are inclusive. So, for instance, I know for the Ayalolo and some of the Metro Mass, once you are getting on board, there are ways of bringing the entrance, lower it. Lower it so that the clearance comes quite low for some people with disability to also get on board. And there are areas within the buses that you need to, reserve for people with disability. Also, we have these same areas we also reserve for pregnant women, and then the aged. We also, trying to also advocate that the urban roads or the highways, those who construct terminals, would always also ensure that we have ramps, giving access to people with disability, having access to the terminal areas where they wait and then wait for, sit or stand and wait for buses or vehicles to come. We also advocating, which has actually been put in law, and for all market facilities, all public facilities that are to be constructed, they should ensure that they put in areas where they are really friendly to people with disability, and also make sure that we reserve some places also for children and then all that. But I must say that all these policies or all these advocacies we've made, but we've been tracking some of these things, and it's not been adhered to fully. The strength that we
Percy, I think you've just frozen there, Percy. I might ask you just to quickly maybe conclude on the inclusivity point, as we are slowly but surely coming towards the end of our webinar. Thank you so much.
All right, I think it's better now. So in concluding on this inclusivity, because we also serve on some of these national bodies, we try to put some of these indicators in what we call the national assessment of various local authorities. There are some assessment called the DPAT. So we've tried to put some of these indicators in those DPAT assessments to ensure that assemblies comply with some of these things, and they make sure that they prepare reports and they implement most of their infrastructure, bringing in issues of inclusivity in there. And once that is done, because the assessments are also performance based, once they comply, they get some few investments that come to them, and they use for most of their infrastructure in their built up areas. So there's some kind of compliance, and we closely monitoring the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Percy. Thank you for all of those important points, and really kind of making the point as well that, you know, we have to be thinking of all these things: climate resilience, equity, planning, and they all kind of go hand in hand. I want to circle back to Alex Johnson, if I may, for your insights, Alex, because I wanted to ask you, you know, what sort of steps are being taken in Accra to improve the resilience of transport systems to climate change, and what you think might be, you know, the concrete steps and actions that need to be taken in the short term, long term. If you could give me your quick insights on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity again. I think that for the short term, we have concentrated on making sure that we have a data system which we are actively going to make sure that there is going to be a vision development process centered around a data platform that provides insights of investment opportunities in the sector for other stakeholders to be able to fully participate in contributing resources in developing those, let me say, very needed infrastructure. Currently, the assessment we have is that there is not enough public funds to go around all the infrastructure needs we have. But we are also fully aware that there are financial actors who are operating inside Ghana, who are supporting very important projects outside the country. And all of these are within the spaces of services and transport. So it is not as if it's a totally brownfield, but we think that as much as we are able to disseminate data, businesses can pick this data up as sources of intelligence for lowering their investment risk, for instance, and also simply requiring governments to lay the infrastructure for the information management to facilitate the trust that people need for any governance structure to be willing to participate in investment. One low-hanging fruit we have seen is that if you have more than 4 million people moving around the metropolis, creating number of trips which are into billions annually, you have a potential of monetizing a system if you have a platform to just mobilize or pool these resources together. We don't think that it's a case that should be given up on, and more especially because there is data to give you insights into how to put all of this together. I think the materials and the data that the projects have provided is so rich. I will encourage everybody here to have a careful look at the structure and the contents. And I believe that we'll come back to discuss more about the opportunities that this data is going to be providing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. We have a very short amount of time left, but did you want to may say something about the data and how that can be used maybe now, and then we might go to our closing remarks from Marie, if you'd like to make one last intervention around that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let me say that one of the first things that we want to use this data for is for the development of our sustainable urban mobility plan. I don't think it's very good for us as a city that at this stage and at a point in 2025, we do not have a sustainable urban mobility plan. This, I think, will be the platform that is going to become the basis for mobilizing or identifying all the active stakeholders. So it's also a rallying point for our social institutions to work across sectors and to make sure that we can achieve our vision. So we still look forward to coming back to everybody. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'd like to just ask if there are any other questions. I don't think we have any questions on the chat, but if any of our panelists would like to make one final short comment. And if not, if there are no other comments, we could go straight away to Marie Tremolière for some closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So, yes, I would like to keep one main message, that is the importance of informed and contextualized data to better anticipate future urban development. As we see in the transport system of Accra and Kumasi today, are emblematic of the broader challenges confronting numerous cities all over Africa in a context of growing urban expansions and urban needs. The current accessibility challenges to essential services through walking and public transport in Accra are particularly evident when considering how residents access markets, which serves as essential hubs and sources of employment for many residents. This clearly calls, as expressed by Alex, for a need to redesign the transport system and the way it fits in the current and future built environment and its implication in terms of sustainability. This can be done only through informed statistics and data and their accessibility. I want to highlight that this project is a collaborative effort that we have seen, implying Ghanaian researchers at ITF and local partners from Accra, namely notably GAPTE. We had two-pronged approach to this project with the intention that it could serve as a proof of concept for other cities to replicate the analysis. The first was to adapt an accessibility model to the context of Accra, which relied almost entirely on open spatial data sources and lays with the urban scenarios proposed in the Accra Future Urban Plan. This iterative approach is key. This experience could nourish ongoing reflection among mayors and local actors through existing platforms such as CGLU Afrique or Convention des maires pour l'Afrique subsaharienne, comme ça. There is a key role to play by regional organizations like UMOA in coordinating exchanges and peer learning among their member states, a role for local partners. There is a role also for partners to play in supporting such initiative. And I would like to thank again SWAC members and more specifically the Swiss Development Corporation for having made this work possible. J'aimerais remercier encore les participants pour leurs interventions.
I'd like once again to thank the participants, the panelists for their interventions, thank our partners in Accra for this great work, that we've carried out together. I would like to thank UEMOA for its commitment regarding the dissemination of our work, notably through Africa Police. And I would like to thank Mame for mentioning future prospects regarding transportation and climate when it comes to developing the regional transport systems and developing also the regional transport observatory. So again, we remain at your disposal if you have any question to share data, to share publications, the publications that have guided this work. Thank you.
Merci, Marie.
Merci, Marie. Thank you so much for capturing all of those important points, all of the interconnected challenges, but also the opportunities to make urban expansion more equitable, resilient, and well connected. I would like to thank all of our speakers for their thoughtful contributions, and to all of those who tuned in online, thank you for your participation. It has been a very rich exchange of perspectives. And finally, if you would like to learn more about SWAC's work in this area or in our other work streams, please do not hesitate to check out our website at oecd.org/SWAC. I wish you all a lovely afternoon and thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Merci, au revoir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.